Be honest with yourself for a second. Somewhere in your house, there's probably a drawer full of old charging cables. You open it, look inside, and see a bunch of cables you haven't used in years. Some of them belong to phones you no longer own. Some belong to old cameras. Some belong to speakers. And then there's that one cable. You have absolutely no idea what it was made for, but every time you think about throwing it away, your brain says, "What if I need it one day?" So you close the drawer. We've all done it. For years, that drawer was like a small museum of old technology. Every device came with a different charging cable. Your phone used one, your digital camera used another, your MP3 player had its own charger. Even printers had those big square cables that looked like they belonged on a spaceship. Nothing matched. Nothing was simple. If you bought a new gadget, chances were you also needed another cable. It was honestly a mess. But then something changed. Around 2014, a small oval-shaped connector quietly appeared. At first, not many people paid attention, but little by little, it started replacing everything. Phones, laptops, tablets, gaming handhelds, headphones, power banks, monitors, even game consoles. Today, that tiny connector has become almost everywhere. It's called USB-C. And honestly, it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to technology. But why? What makes this tiny port so special? And why did even Apple finally give up and switch the iPhone to USB-C? Let's go back in time. Back in the 90s, connecting devices to a computer was a nightmare. The back of your computer looked confusing. There were huge ports, small ports, round ports, square ports. Some were for printers, some for keyboards, some for computer mice, some were even called game ports. And if you plugged something in, sometimes you had to restart your computer before it would even work. It wasn't fun. Then, in 1996, several technology companies came together. They had one simple idea. Instead of giving every device a different connector, why don't we make one connector that works for almost everything? That's how USB was born. The first version most people remember is USB Type-A. You know, that big rectangular USB plug we've all used for years. There's just one problem. No matter how many times you use it, somehow you always plug it in the wrong way first. Every single time. It's almost like a law of nature. Interestingly, the engineer who helped design USB later admitted something. He said one of his biggest regrets was not making it reversible. In other words, they knew people would struggle with it, but technology at the time simply wasn't ready. As phones became smaller, the connectors also became smaller. We got mini USB, then micro USB. Different cameras had different plugs, hard drives had another one, printers still used their giant square connector. By around 2013, the dream of having one cable for everything had completely disappeared. Instead, we had more cables than ever. Then, the biggest technology companies decided to try again. Apple, Intel, Microsoft, HP, and several others. Together, they created something completely new, USB-C. At first glance, it looks simple, just a small oval-shaped connector. But inside, it's completely different from older USB cables. Old USB cables only had a few metal connections. USB-C has 24. Yes, 24. And they're arranged in a very clever way. That's why USB-C works no matter which side you plug in. There is no upside down, no wrong direction. Just plug it in, it works, simple. And honestly, once you start using USB-C, going back feels impossible. But USB-C isn't only about convenience, it's also incredibly powerful. One USB-C cable can carry electricity, it can transfer files, it can connect to monitors, it can even send high-quality video to a TV. Some USB-C cables can even power gaming laptops. Think about that, one tiny cable doing the job that once needed several different cables. That's amazing.
Some of the newest USB-C cables can deliver up to 240 watts of power. That's enough for many powerful laptops. Years ago, most chargers delivered only a tiny fraction of that. Technology has come a very long way. Here's another cool fact many people don't know. Some USB-C cables actually have a tiny computer inside them. Seriously, the cable isn't just carrying electricity, it's also communicating. When you plug your charger into your laptop, the cable helps both devices decide how much power is safe. It's almost like the charger and laptop are having a conversation before charging begins. Pretty impressive for something that fits in your pocket. Now let's talk about Apple. This part is actually very interesting. Many people think Apple ignored USB-C because they didn't like it, but that's not exactly true. Apple actually created USB-C. The company was part of the group that developed it. Apple even put USB-C on MacBooks years before it appeared on the iPhone. So if Apple believed in USB-C, why didn't the iPhone use it? The answer is simple: Lightning. Apple had its own charging port. It was called Lightning. It worked well, it was small, it was reversible, and Apple controlled it. Accessory companies had to pay Apple to make Lightning products. That became a very successful business, so Apple kept using Lightning on iPhones for many years, even while many Android phones had already switched to USB-C. Eventually, the European Union stepped in. The EU had a problem. Every year, thousands of old chargers were ending up in the trash. People kept buying new devices with different cables. That created a lot of electronic waste. So, the EU introduced a new rule. If companies wanted to sell smartphones and many other portable devices in Europe, they needed to use USB-C. No exceptions. That changed everything. Apple had two choices: keep Lightning and lose the European market, or switch to USB-C. The decision was obvious. Apple finally moved the iPhone to USB-C, and just like that, Lightning slowly became part of history. Today, life is much easier. Many people can charge their phone, tablet, laptop, wireless earbuds, power bank, gaming handheld, and even some cameras using the very same cable. That's something we couldn't imagine just a few years ago. It's one less cable to carry, one less charger to buy, and one less headache. Honestly, USB-C isn't exciting because it's new. It's exciting because it finally solved a problem that people had been dealing with for decades. Sometimes the best technology isn't the flashiest. Sometimes it's simply the thing that makes everyday life easier. So maybe it's finally time to open that drawer, take out those old micro USB cables, those mini USB cables, those mysterious chargers you haven't touched in years, and finally let them go, because chances are the future belongs to one small cable: USB-C.